how do improved graphics change the audience's relationship and the player's relationship with violence and with gruesome details? Like, does VR make violence, I mean, more real? Does it change how we actually shoot people in video games? So how do you guys think about the future of gaming in terms of violence?
You know, I think the VR question is really interesting. One of the things, I'm not super experienced with VR. I'm not a developer of VR, and I've only done a very few things in it. But one of the things that interests me most about it is the fact that some of the tricks that we rely on as creators no longer work in VR anymore. It's very difficult to do your sort of like Doom, twitchy, running around, shooting things all the time games. Mm-hmm. You have to work really hard to put compelling gun battles into VR. And I hope that that gives us kind of, that throws that toolbox out for us and forces us to develop new tools for what are the interesting things to do in VR. I also think that there is, people talk about how much more intense everything feels in VR, and that's an experience that I've had myself. You know, like you spend 10, 15 minutes in there and it's like, you're almost exhausted, right? By the experience. And I think that that will also dissuade creators from putting in as much violence, because it will just be overwhelming, honestly. And it might be too much for a lot of people to take.
And Doom is coming to VR, so hey, well, I guess we'll see how overwhelming that is.
I think there's kind of an overall trend, not just in video games, but even in movies and TV shows, where it seems like gore is more and more popular. Mm-hmm. And I hope that that trend changes in the future, but I don't know if it will, because I think realism is what all our graphics are going towards, and it's almost like people desire that realism, and so for some people, gore is realism. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
I still think that there's a great way to tell your story and have conflict and have that conflict resolved and everything without necessarily needing that gore. So I really hope that some people, some developers kind of turn the trend, but I don't know if it will.
Right. Speaking of film and all these other mediums as well, obviously video games are not the only medium to have killing and violence and blood and gore. So do you ever think the mainstream audience will see video game violence the same way they see film violence? Or will video game violence always be a little different, a little separate? What do you think? It's a big ask, I know. That's a pretty large question. It's hard.
Something that we've talked about for a long time, right? Is, does the interactivity of video games bring people more into what they're doing, right? Does it have a different effect than passively watching the same kind of violence or whatever else you're doing? Yeah. And I think that like a lot of people have tried to use games to teach various things. You know, we're trying as artists to affect emotional and other change in our audience. Right. And I think that you can't embrace that on the one hand while also saying, making people shoot, you know, brown folks overseas virtually forever will have no effect. You know, I think there's got to be a balance there of like at what level are we asking the player to become this person that is performing these acts, and at what point does that, I don't want to say train or even desensitize, because I feel like those have been used in the past so much to vilify games.
Yes,
But I do think you have to ask, like, what is that really what we want out of video games and out of what the experience of video games is and can be?
Yeah. Any thoughts, sir?
I kind of think there was at one point a separation in people's minds as to what a game felt like to be playing and interacting with the graphics and things like that. I think there was a separation in people's minds that this is a video game, it's not a movie, it's not really real life. But now, our graphics are so real and everything is so almost, it looks like movies. If you look at any of the showcases we've seen here at E3, they look like movies. They're playing like movies. They're voice actors and everything, and I think it really is. I think we've crossed that line where video games and movies are almost the same in people's minds.